Hi everybody, it's Stephen Brooke and welcome to Architectural Photography and Composition. AI tools are affecting everybody in any kind of visual medium especially, and architectural photography is no different. And there are new tools that have been developed, are being developed by Photoshop that are game changers in how we process our files. But there's always the discussion about what one should do to the images to keep them with a sense of veracity, a sense of reality, much the way photojournalists deal with their work. They, of course, cannot change anything. Like my friend Patrick Farrell, who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer in Miami, he has done work in disaster zones and in conflict zones, and he has to come back, and his work is exactly what was in front of his camera. I come from a different point of view, and we have discussed this over the years. My approach to architectural photography is I consider what we do as we are the next generation of this great artistic legacy that comes from Vermeer and Sonderdam and Hopper and Hugh Ferris and Piranesi and Canaletto. And they were committed to perfection and the highest artistic standards, and it is those standards that I think need to guide us as professionals. So there are now powerful new tools that Photoshop has developed, particularly the remove tool and generative fill, and I'm sure all of you have started to play with these and realize just how powerful they really are. So what I believe is that using these tools on every image, on every project, elevates our profession as architectural photographers and brings us closer to this great tradition. So let me say that I think you should discuss these issues with your client ahead of time. You may have a client that wants every wire out of the way, that wants everything cleaned up as much as possible, or you may have a client that says just whatever you see, that's what we have, and that's how I want you to approach the photography. Knowing that going in means you may have to adopt certain points of view, knowing you've got things that are going to be in the way, and you're going to have to move to such a position where they're not in your way. So what are some of the things that we need to think about? One, do whatever it is, does it distract from your understanding of the architecture in general? Another way to look at it is if you were painting or engraving, would you include these things in your painting or your engraving? And if not, don't have them in your photograph. This happens on several occasions. Has the contractor done something? Have they screwed up a design of yours? Have they added something that shouldn't be in there? And does your client want that removed? And of course, does whatever that's in there compromise the overall composition? And finally, and this is important, if you're photographing a school or a hospital or something like that, you are under a legal obligation to not have patients or students in your photographs. And if you can't, they're not going to get up and move when you're shooting, you know ahead of time you're going to have to get them out of there. So what are some of these things? Wires, tree supports. I don't know any landscape architect that wants to see those. Street signs, cars, and cars very often you can't get rid of them. They're going to be there, and there are no drivers there, and they are blocking what you need to see. People. We talked in an earlier video about where to place people in your shots. That's great if you can control it, but very often you can't, and you're going to have people in various parts of your image that you're not going to want there for one reason or another. And lastly, extraneous foliage and what I call tree holes. We've talked about this in an earlier video, and everything is compositional, but you can now remove these things to a degree you never could before. So let's look at the first of these things, which are wires. So one of our in our community asked me, well, how are you doing this? So this is a furniture store that I photographed, and this is right in the middle of the design district, and there was no avoiding all of these wires, but this is not what my client wanted. So before the remove tool, you would have to get rid of these with your cloning tool, or maybe over here with the spot healing tool. It was okay, but not great. But now with the remove tool, I'm going to make it slightly larger than the wire, and I'm just going to run this down here like so. I'm just going to take it this far, and depending on the speed of your computer, now it's gone. And I can continue here. I will do this a piece at a time, so I don't bring in artifacts that sometimes this tool will bring in. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to go through and get rid of all of them. I'm going to remove all of these wires because they're not part of the architecture. And then for something as complicated as this pole, what I will do here is I will do this a piece at a time. Make sure I don't pick up artifacts like that as I go. And then I will continue all the way down to get rid of it, so that ultimately I'm going to have an image that looks like this. My client doesn't want that. They expect from me that I have an image that is clean. Now, does any of this, are you going to miss it when you see this? No, hell no. All of these wires are just in the way, and there's nothing about them that helps our understanding of the architecture. It just gets in the way. Here's another example. You find when you're photographing installations like operating rooms and all, there are wires all over the place, and they will not let you touch any of their gear. So you decide, okay, there are some wires here that are necessary to understand the equipment, but not this. Not these wires dragging on the floor, or this one back here where something is plugged in. So I get rid of all of those to make a nice clean shot. Here's another one. You have this all the time with computers. I've arranged things as tightly as I can, but there are wires here, wires in and around the computer. So I get these desks as clean as I possibly can to get rid of as many, if not all, of these wires. Are you going to miss them? No. The next thing is, if you're photographing a project and you're there before people move in, before the landscape is mature enough, you're going to have these tree supports, this forest of tree supports, and as we discussed earlier, no landscape architect I have ever worked with has said, oh, you can just leave the tree supports in. They all have asked, can you get rid of these, please? So with the cloning tool, yes, you could do it as a bit of a chore, but here, with the remove tool, it's really easy. And I go through, take them out, and I'm always looking to see what's behind so that the Photoshop tool does not add any information, and I will get rid of all of them. Now, this used to take a lot of time to get rid of, but now with the remove tool, you can get rid of them. You can get rid of this little pole. And then another thing is, let's get rid of that. Back when I photographed at Miami International Airport on airside, there were hundreds of these orange cones, and they're designed to catch your eye, and they stuck out, and I had to go through on every shot from airside to get rid of every one of these. I say by hand, of course it's all by hand, but with the cloning tool, and that took a long time, as opposed to using the remove tool, and I get enough of it so that The content aware aspect of the tool picks up enough information. Now what happened here is I lost part of the pole, and I can always add this back with the cloning tool. I can always add part of that back in here if I want. Or in this case, I can go through if I want to and just take this whole pole out altogether. Now there was construction going on here, so I get rid of that. I will get rid of the fence and the cement block. None of these things have anything to do with the architecture. They're just eyesores, which you would get rid of if you had the time. But usually there's no time when you're shooting. You're under a time constraint. You don't have time to do that. Back in the days of film, you either lived with it or you went back. Someone had to go out in the field with you and get rid of all that stuff. So in the end, you have something that looks like this. You go from all of these tree supports and all this junk to a really nice, clean shot. Now, I got rid of this pole, and I got rid of it in another image. And I had a discussion with an urban planner, and she said, well, if I'm an urban planner, I was responsible for putting these light poles in there. And I'm going to wonder where the hell they are. This is where talking with your client is really important. If my client is the landscape architect who spec'd it, or is the urban planner who spec'd it, yes, I'm going to leave them in there. And it's also, if it's a real bother, I'm going to have to find another location to shoot that elevation where that pole is not in the way. We'll say very often, it's not my first choice for where I need to shoot. But if I have to leave those poles in there, I have to find a place where they're not going to disturb how I want to show the architecture. Here again, this is street signs and poles. I got rid of the handicap parking, and I got rid of this pole again in the same situation, knowing that if they want to see that, I'm going to have to go to another location, leave it in there, but show the facade where these light poles are not in the way. Can I do an axial shot here? No, I can't get in front of this pole and still get the breadth of this building. I couldn't do it easily, even with photo merge, without getting wicked distortion. So I am back here to see all of my building, and then I will get rid of these elements. And by the way, the architect on this job was happy that I got rid of it. Street signs, this is another real problem. And in this case, what I wanted to do is I wanted to, my client did the tile pattern. They were the urban planners. They did this tile pattern. And what I wanted you to do is I wanted you to come in here, and work your way down the tile pattern. Well, in this image, bam, here's this sign right in the way. Sure, it leads you in this direction, but I didn't like how it broke up this space. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the sign. And I want to make sure I get the edge of this. Now I'm picking up information that I don't want, and I'm going to use the option tool and fine-tune my selection. Okay, now I'm going to go to Edit, Generative Fill, and I'm going to tell it remove sign and pole and fill with background. And then I'm going to hit Generative Fill, and what I'm going to get 3 options. Usually one of these 3 will be just right. And if not, I'll just do the whole thing over again. But let's see what it comes up with. Wow, okay, that's not bad. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to toggle. This is what I had, and this is what the Gen Fill gave me. And that, it hasn't added anything goofy to this. This is all nice and clean back here. The only thing it has, it left the one little bullard here, and I can decide to keep that or not. In this case, I think I would just keep this. And so if I'm happy with this, I will then simply go to flatten image and save it. Now, if I don't want that, I can always go to the remove tool, and then I'm going to use the remove tool to just get rid of this random white bullard here. Now I have a nice clean sidewalk. So I started here with something I don't want, and now I'm going to end up here with a nice clean view going into the street. So cars are a real issue, of course, and in this case, I used a generative fill, and I simply selected the cars and just said in generative fill, remove cars, fill with background, and the cars are gone. And I got rid of them over here. Same thing with this view of the Pantheon. I looked at this for years. These cars and trucks over here, they stay there overnight. There's a truck over here, and then these two trees are right in the way, and I simply use the remove tool and got rid of all of that to get a nice clean shot. And the only thing I had to reproduce was at the bottom, the base of this column, and I simply cloned from here over. When I photographed this in Rome, I looked at this lunch wagon. It never moved. They must have paid the city to stay there because it didn't go away at night. And so I lived with this photograph in front of the Forum of Nerva since I photographed this in the 90s. Finally, with AI and generative fill, I was able to simply select the cars, remove it, and with a few tweaks, have a nice, clean view of the wall and where the street turns, and don't have to look at this truck anymore. I also did that here. There's a car back in here, which kind of ruined this nice line going down, and I just used the remove tool to get rid of these little pieces in here. Very simple to do, but a real clean way to do it. Now, as far as the people goes, the problem with the people in this shot is they're right on the edge of my image, and they're looking off frame, which is not how I want them to be looking. If they're going to be here and looking into the frame, I could live with that, but they're not. So what I've done is I've taken these vacationers out of my picture. And this was a twilight shot, time constraint, no time to ask them to move. I don't think they would have anyway. So instead of this, where I've got them looking off frame, now I have a nice clean shot on this side. I did the same thing here. This guy in the red shirt, he really stands out. This guy in the white shirt, I want you to go here. I want you to turn and come back. I don't want your eye to get stopped here. So I got rid of them. They're going to go here. You're going to make a turn. You're going to go down. Again, my client is the one that did the tile pattern in here. So I don't want your eye stopped. I want you to go here and move smoothly to the end. We talked about this in our video on Everything is Compositional, and I talked about how important it was to really clean up a landscape. And your landscape architect might not even see what it is you're doing, but it will make a huge difference. Things that stick out into the corner of the image. Extraneous pieces here. foliage that sticks up above the roof line, this piece hanging down here, and what I call tree holes, which wreck the overall composition. So I'm going to get rid of them. Let me toggle back and forth, and you can see what a difference it makes to get rid of this extraneous stuff and to clean up the tree holes and make this side of the composition work a lot better, where the shadows are really compositional now. So the question is, why do we do this? And again, we do it to give our clients as perfect an image as possible. If you know architects, if you work with them, you know that there's an idea and there's a drawing, and between that drawing and the final project is just this gauntlet of things that get in the way. Clients, contractors, subcontractors, and very often the last hope to kind of recover the original idea is with the photography. And in the days of film, you were limited. But now with these tools, it's possible to kind of retrieve as much of that original idea as possible. Even though things may have gone south for the architect, you can fix a lot of those. And again, talk to your client and make sure that's what they want to do. More often than not, this is what they would like to have you do. Doing this on every image, for every job, this elevates our profession. This allows us to kind of shake hands across time with these great artists who have formed the basis of what we do as architectural photographers. People like Vermeer and Hopper and Piranesi and Canaletto. We can get close to the level of perfection that they always sought. When you look at a Vermeer or look at a Piranesi, you can't take anything out or put anything in without making that piece less than it is. And that's always been my goal, and it's going to continue to be my goal in my architectural photography. And I hope you will consider this approach to the work that you're doing. So if this makes sense to you, please give the video a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. The channel is free, but you can support the site by purchasing a copy of Architectural Photography and Composition. It's a bargain at $9.99. It's a real bargain. It's over 360 pages. And if you are just starting out, I promise everything you need to know is in that book. Now, if you would like a more intense step-by-step guide through architectural photography and composition, I highly recommend Fundamentals of Architectural Photography and Composition. It's our online course that we have through Udemy. And I think you will find, again, everything you will need to know to guide you through this art, whether you are just starting out or maybe you're a professional who is adding architectural photography to your arsenal, to your work. I think you're going to find something in every single lesson that will be of value to you. So thank you again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.